My family paid for my sister's $150K wedding and gave her $400,000 for her house. When I got married, they promised to pay for everything. But when I returned from my honeymoon, I received an itemized bill for every penny and demanded immediate payment. What I did left them speechless. I'm 28 years old. I work as a software engineer, and 2 weeks ago, I received an invoice from my parents for my wedding. No, I'm not exaggerating. Literally an itemized invoice with every cent they spent, and when I say this destroyed me, that would be an understatement. But I guess I should start from the beginning, because this story goes way back, like basically my whole life. I grew up with my sister Michelle, who's 4 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she was always the golden child of the family. You know, the one who could do everything right while I was like the backup daughter. It's not that my parents were abusive or anything like that, but there was a clear difference in how they treated us. Michelle wanted piano lessons. They bought her a grand piano. Michelle wanted to go to an expensive summer camp. Off Michelle went. I'd ask for something, and it was, well, Samantha, maybe next year. Or, we don't think you really need it. When Michelle graduated from college, my parents gave her a new car, a BMW, and when I graduated, they gave me $500 and a speech about the importance of being independent and responsible with money. I remember that day perfectly because it was like, seriously? This is what my achievement is worth to you? The thing is, I learned from a young age not to expect anything from them. I moved out when I was 16, not because they kicked me out, but because I couldn't stand anymore watching Michelle get everything she wanted while I had to beg for scraps. I went to live with a friend and her family. Finished high school, working part-time at a coffee shop. I got scholarships for college because I knew my parents weren't going to pay a cent for me, even though they had paid the $200,000 Michelle's private university cost. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm proud of having made it on my own. Seriously, but it hurts when you see that your parents simply don't consider you worth the same investment as your sister. I met Benjamin when I was 24. We worked at the same tech company, and honestly, he was the first person in my life who made me feel like I was enough. You know what I mean? I didn't have to work 3 times as hard to get half the recognition. He just saw me and valued me for who I was. We started dating like a year after meeting, and honestly, it was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. Like, he came from a normal family where the parents treated all their kids equally, and for him, my family's dynamic was completely incomprehensible. Fast forward to 3 years ago. Michelle marries this guy who worked in finance. I think he was a stockbroker or something like that. And my parents threw a $150,000 wedding. I literally read the amount in a family WhatsApp group where my mom was bragging. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst came after the wedding when Michelle and her husband were looking for a house, and my parents gave them $400,000 for the down payment. 400%, $1,000. Let me repeat that, because I still can't fully process it. My parents gave my sister almost $500,000 as a wedding gift. And when I found out I was with Benjamin in our 2-bedroom apartment that we were paying for together, and I literally froze staring at the message. Benjamin asked me what was wrong, and when I told him, he could only say, "Wow, that's an insane amount of money." I tried not to feel bad. I really tried. I told myself I'd accepted a long time ago that Michelle was the favorite, that I'd built my life without their help and I was fine, that I didn't need their money or their approval. But the truth is, it did hurt. It hurt a lot. It wasn't the money itself. It was what it represented. It was confirmation that to my parents, Michelle was worth $400,000 more than me, that her happiness and her future mattered in a way that mine simply didn't. Benjamin proposed to me like 6 months after Michelle's wedding. He did it in a super simple and sweet way. On a hike we did often through a park near our house, and I said yes without thinking twice. We started planning the wedding, and from the beginning we decided it was going to be something small and manageable, like 50 people max. A nice place but not extravagant. Good food but not Michelin chef. I mean, a genuine celebration without spending our life savings. We did the numbers and calculated we could do a nice wedding with $36,000, which for us was a lot of money, but it was doable if we saved during the year of planning. I called my parents to tell them I'd gotten engaged, and to my surprise, they seemed genuinely happy. My mom even cried a little on the phone and said she was very happy for me, that Benjamin seemed like a good man and that she couldn't wait for the wedding. I was like, okay, this is weird, but fine. Maybe they're trying to be better. Maybe they realized they'd treated me differently my whole life and want to make up for it. 3 days later, My dad called me and asked how much we were planning to spend on the wedding. I told him around $36,000, and there was silence on the line. And then he said, "We want to pay for your entire wedding. You don't have to worry about anything." Honestly, I was speechless. Benjamin was next to me, and I was making signs like, "What the hell is happening?" My dad kept talking and said they'd been reflecting a lot, and they realized that maybe they hadn't been as present in my life as they should have been, but that they wanted to be there for this important moment. That please let them do this for me. I was crying by that point. I don't know if it was from happiness or relief or what exactly, but I felt like they were finally seeing me, like I finally mattered as much as Michelle. I told him thank you so much, that it meant the world to me, and he said he just wanted it to be a perfect day. The next few months were weird, in a good way. My parents were super involved in wedding planning. My mom came, with me to try on dresses. My dad had opinions about the venue and the music. Michelle even helped organize my bachelorette party and seemed genuinely happy for me. I started thinking that maybe I'd been wrong all this time, that maybe they did love me but didn't know how to show it, or that they'd finally matured and understood they had to treat me better. Benjamin was a bit more skeptical. He said he hoped it was genuine, but not to get my hopes up too much. But I was in happy bride mode and wanted to believe things were finally changing. The wedding was perfect. Seriously, it was one of the most beautiful days of my life. The venue was gorgeous, the food was delicious, the decorations turned out exactly how I wanted, and seeing Benjamin waiting for me at the end of the aisle was like, I don't know, like everything finally made sense. My parents were there all day, smiling and taking pictures. My dad walked me down the aisle, and I even saw his eyes tearing up. My mom hugged me before the ceremony and told me she was very proud of me. Michelle was my maid of honor and gave a really nice speech about growing up together. Everything was so perfect that I was thinking, this is it. I finally have the family I always wanted. I'm finally part of this. Benjamin and I went to Greece for our honeymoon. We'd been saving for 2 years for that trip, and it was amazing. Like one of those 2 weeks where you completely disconnect and just exist in a happy bubble with your favorite person. We got back on Sunday afternoon, arrived at the apartment tired but happy, left our suitcases lying in the living room and crashed on the couch to check accumulated messages. There were like 200 notifications between the two of us, messages from friends, work emails, that kind of thing. Then I saw I had an email from my dad with the subject, wedding, final details, and I thought maybe it was something about photos or some detail they'd forgotten. I opened the email and there was a PDF attached. I opened it without thinking much, and it was an invoice. A detailed and itemized invoice of every cent my parents had spent on my wedding. Event venue, $12,350. Catering, $8,240. Flowers, $2,890. DJ, $2,100. Photographer and videographer, $4,500. And it went on like that. Everything they'd paid for was there with its exact price down to the cents. The total at the end said $34,445.89, and below was a note that said, "Please transfer the full amount to the following account within the next 30 days. Thank you." I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. Benjamin noticed something was wrong and asked me what was up, and I just handed him my phone, unable to speak. He read the email and went quiet too, and then said, "This has to be a mistake. It can't be serious." But I knew it wasn't a mistake. I knew my parents well enough to know this was exactly what it looked like. I got up from the couch and went to our room, threw myself on the bed and started crying, like ugly crying, with those sobs that come from your stomach. Benjamin came after me and just held me without saying anything. Because, what can you say in a situation like this? I spent the whole night awake thinking about what to do. Part of me wanted to call my parents and yell at them, ask them how they could do something like this, but another part of me just wanted to disappear and never talk to them again. Benjamin told me I didn't have to pay anything, that legally they couldn't force me because they'd offered to pay with no conditions, but I knew that if I didn't pay, I was never going to hear the end of it. I was going to be the ungrateful daughter who didn't value her parents' gesture. I was going to be family gossip for the next 20 years. The next day, I went to the bank and took out the money I had saved, plus some from my investments, and completed the $34,445.89. I made a transfer to the account my parents had indicated, and then sat down to write an email. I told them I'd paid the invoice in full. Thank you so much for giving me one last lesson about my place in the family, and that from that moment on, I didn't want to have contact with them. I told them I spent 28 years trying to earn their love and approval, working twice as hard as Michelle to get half the recognition, and that I thought things had finally changed, but obviously I was wrong. I told them Michelle could keep being their favorite daughter without competition because I was officially giving up on trying to be part of that dynamic. I sent the email and blocked their numbers, blocked their social media profiles, basically deleted them from my digital life. I didn't expect the reaction that came after. The next day, I started getting messages from uncles, cousins, even family friends I didn't know had my number, all saying basically the same thing, that I was ungrateful, that my parents had paid for my entire wedding and I'd written them a horrible email, that I should be ashamed of myself. Michelle called me like 15 times from different numbers and I finally answered because I was fed up. She started screaming on the phone saying I was being dramatic, that mom and dad just wanted me to learn to be responsible with money, that they'd always planned to gift me the wedding but wanted me to feel the weight of what things cost. I asked her if she had to pay for her $150,000 wedding before receiving her $400,000 gift, and she went quiet. Then she said that was different, that they trusted her more to handle money, and I just hung up. Like 3 days later, I received an email from my mom. Long, like 3 pages of text. It said the whole thing had been a terrible misunderstanding, that the invoice was a life lesson to teach me the value of things, but that they always planned to gift me the wedding plus an additional $100,000 as a wedding gift. It said they were devastated by my reaction, that they never imagined I would take it. Like that please return the money and they would give it back to me along with the $100,000 that was always the plan to give me. It ended saying they loved me and please contact them to fix this. I read the email like 5 times trying to make sense of it. Benjamin read it too and said, "This is pure manipulation. You can't believe them." And he was right. I knew it. But there was a part of me that wanted to believe so desperately that it had all been a mistake, that they really did love me and wanted to make up for everything. So I did something impulsive. I opened my bank app, took a picture of the check I'd made out to my parents that they hadn't cashed yet, and deposited it into my account using mobile deposit. Basically, I got my money back before they could do anything. Then I replied to my mom's email saying, "Thanks for the clarification. I really appreciate that you always wanted to give me $100,000. I'll be waiting for the transfer whenever you'd like to make it." I didn't mention anything about the check. The next day, Michelle showed up at my apartment unannounced, banging on the door and yelling for me to open it. Benjamin was at work and I was alone, so I just stayed sitting on the couch listening to her scream. She was saying they'd canceled the check. How dare I steal their money? That I was a thief and a liar. She threatened to call the police if I didn't open up and give the money back. I didn't say anything, just waited for her to get tired and leave, which took like 20 minutes. After she left, I sent Benjamin a message telling him, and he immediately left work to come home. He was like, "This is harassment now. We're going to have to consider a restraining order if they don't stop." That same night, I got a call from a number I didn't have blocked. I answered thinking maybe it was something from work. And it was my uncle, my dad's brother. We didn't have much of a relationship. I saw him maybe once a year at family gatherings. But he'd always been kind to me. He told me he'd heard what was happening and that he needed to tell me something. Turns out like 20 years ago, when he got married, my parents did exactly the same thing to him and his wife. They offered to pay for the wedding, did everything nice until the end, and then sent him an invoice. My uncle paid and never spoke to them again until years later when they superficially reconciled, but the relationship was never the same. He told me he'd kept quiet all these years because he thought maybe they'd changed, but now he saw it was a pattern, that this was who they were, and probably who they were going to keep being. That conversation changed everything for me. It wasn't just me. It wasn't that I'd done something wrong or was too sensitive. This was literally what my parents did. It was their way of maintaining control over their children, using money as a weapon. My uncle told me the best decision he'd made was establishing clear boundaries and not depending on to them for anything, that emotionally it had been difficult, but it was worth the peace of mind. I thanked him for telling me and for being honest with me when no one else in the family was. The messages and calls from extended family didn't stop. Everyone had an opinion about what I should do, as if they knew the whole story when they'd obviously only heard my parents' version. Several cousins wrote to me saying I was destroying the family by being proud, that I should apologize and return the money. An aunt told me I was selfish for not appreciating everything my parents had done for me throughout my life, which was especially ironic considering my parents literally hadn't done anything for me since I was 16. I blocked everyone who contacted me to complain or pressure me. I didn't have the energy to constantly defend myself. Like 2 weeks after the invoice disaster, my dad left a voicemail on my work phone, which was the only number I hadn't blocked because I couldn't for work reasons. The message said he wanted to talk to me. That's all. Just talk. Please give him the chance to explain himself in person. Not that he was going to give me the $100,000 they supposedly always wanted to give me. Not that he was apologizing, just that he wanted to talk. Benjamin told me I didn't have to see him if I didn't want to, that I didn't owe him anything. But I felt like I needed that closure. I needed to hear what he had to say. We agreed to meet at a public cafe near my work. I arrived first and saw him come in. He looked older than I remembered him, even though only like 3 weeks had passed since the wedding. He sat across from me and put an envelope on the table, said there was a check in there for $34,445.89 to give me back what I'd paid, that it had been a terrible mistake and he was very sorry. He didn't mention the additional $100,000 my mom had promised in the email. I asked him directly, "And the $100,000 that Mom said you always planned to give me?" He was quiet for a moment and then said that had been an exaggeration in the heat of the moment, that there was never a plan to give $100,000, that the original idea was to charge for the wedding, to teach me financial responsibility, and then give me the money back after a few months when I'd learned the lesson. I asked him what lesson exactly I was supposed to learn. He told me Michelle had always been more careful with money, more responsible, and that they wanted to make sure I learned to value things before just giving me everything. I said, "You gave Michelle $400,000. How is that teaching her to value things?" He said it was different because Michelle had earned it, because she'd always been a good daughter, because she respected and valued them. That's when something in me just shut off. I didn't feel anger or sadness. I just felt nothing. I told him he could keep his check, that I didn't need it, and that I also didn't need to keep having this conversation or this relationship. I got up to leave and he tried to grab my arm, saying, "Wait, let's not end it like this." I told him this wasn't me ending anything. This was me accepting something that had been true my whole life, but I'd never wanted to admit that I simply wasn't enough for them and never would be. And that it was okay. That I was going to be okay without them. I walked out of the cafe and didn't look back. It's been 2 weeks since that conversation. My parents stopped contacting me after that. I don't know if it's because they finally understood I'm serious or because they decided I'm not worth it. Michelle sent me one last message, saying that when I wanted to apologize and be part of the family again, they'd be there. I didn't respond. Most of the extended family calmed down too. I guess they found some other drama to talk about. My uncle calls me every so often to see how I'm doing, and those conversations are nice. I feel like I have at least one person from that family who gets me. Benjamin has been amazing through all of this. He's never pressured me to make peace or to forgive. He's just been there letting me process everything at my own pace. He tells me often that he's proud of me for setting boundaries, for not letting myself be manipulated anymore, and that helps. I started therapy last week because I realized I need to process 28 years of feeling like second choice, and I can't do it just with Benjamin. I need professional help to undo all the damage. The thing is, I'm not sad. I mean, yes, I'm sad, but not in the way I expected. I don't miss my parents. I don't miss the awkward family gatherings. I don't miss having to constantly compare myself to Michelle. What I miss is the idea of what I could have had, of what I should have had, a family that loved me unconditionally without using money as a control tool. But that family never really existed. It only existed in my imagination, and part of healing is accepting that. Yesterday, Benjamin and I were cooking together, something simple like pasta, and we were laughing about something silly, and suddenly I realized I was happy, genuinely happy in that moment. And that's something I didn't feel much when my parents were in my life. There was always that layer of anxiety, wondering what I'd done wrong or what I could do better to earn their love. Now, I don't have to wonder about that anymore. I have Benjamin, I have my friends, I have my job that I like, and I have my peace of mind. And maybe that's enough? Maybe that's more than enough? I guess with time, I'll know.